I get that Grayson Rodriguez was having his struggles in the month of May, but you're trying to tell me that what the O's put out there in that bullpen game on Wednesday was better than what Grayson would have given you? I'm not so sure. I'm going to recap a disastrous day on the mound for the O's coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Thursday, June 1st, 2023, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap a tough loss for the Orioles. They fall 12-8 to the Cleveland Guardians, and they have lost back-to-back series for the first time this season. I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from this one, including big days for the bottom of the Orioles order, a 4-hit day for Adley Rutschman, and Aaron Hicks making a nice first impression, but then leaving the game early. And then we'll get to the bad part of this game, the bullpen game plan, why it didn't work, and then what is next for Orioles pitching in this open spot in the rotation. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So we jump in here to start with an Orioles loss. Final score from Oriole Park at Camden Yards on Wednesday afternoon. Guardians 12, Orioles 8, as the O's score 8 runs in back-to-back games after being shut out in the opener. But they lose the series 2 out of 3, and they've lost back-to-back series now to Texas and Cleveland. They go 2-4 on this little 6-game homestand. Orioles, with the loss, did fall even further back of the Tampa Bay Rays, now back to 4 games back in the division as they held on, stranding the bases loaded in the bottom of the ninth to beat the Cubs 4-3 on Wednesday. Orioles now 35-21 on the season. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles' 12-8 loss to the Cleveland Guardians. And the first thing you need to know is the bullpen game did not work at all. Now, we're going to get to it in much greater detail a little bit later here on this episode, but the Orioles went with a bullpen game. They used 7 different pitchers in this one out of the 9 relievers they had. The only guys who didn't pitch were Felix Bautista and Yenye Cano. The Orioles gave up 12 runs on 17 hits. 2 guys at the end pitched okay, but otherwise pretty much a disaster for the Orioles in Grayson Rodriguez's old starting spot. Second thing you need to know from this one is, well, shout out at least to Bryan Baker and Danny Coulombe, who honestly combined to kind of completely save the Orioles bullpen on Wednesday. Now, they couldn't get them to a victory, but with the off day coming up here on a Thursday, and the Orioles having already used 5 pitchers out of their bullpen, and only at that point have recorded 19 outs, shout out to Bryan Baker, who went an inning and 2/3 scoreless with 3 strikeouts, just 1 hit, no walks. And Danny Coulombe, who threw a 1-2-3 top of the ninth. Those were 2 guys who got hit around hard in Tuesday night's win. Neither of them pitched well in that game on Tuesday. And they both bounced back the very next day to come out there and at least save a little bit of the pen. Because I was very worried at one point in this game that the Orioles just weren't even going to be able to find a way to get 27 outs with all their pitchers, but Coulombe and Baker did a nice job to at least finish out the 9 innings. Third thing you need to know from this one as we push it over to the offensive side, which is the positive side of the day for the Orioles, is that Adley Rutschman had a 4-hit day. Rutschman going 4 for 5 with an RBI in this game as well. He had 4 singles, and guess what? 3 of them were infield singles. 2 hard hit balls on the day for Rutschman, who was just beating balls out left and right. And the most impressive one, actually, I would say, came in the 4th inning. Rutschman came up with 2 out and nobody on. Orioles were down 6-5. Hit just kind of a slow roller up the middle in between second and short. And the shortstop Rosario cuts it off, throws to first. But Rutschman just hustling down the line, beats the throw by a half a step. And then the very next batter with 2 outs. Inning probably should have been over. Santander hits a 2-run homer into the bullpen and gives the Orioles a 7-6 lead. Now, it was the last time they would lead in this game, but it looked like that hustle from Rutschman was going to be a pretty big moment, and just wanted to shout that out because things got progressively worse after that. But for Rutschman, his fourth 4-hit day of the season, I mean, he's just been amazing. 289 average, 854 OPS. What else can you say about the guy? He's the best catcher in baseball. Fourth thing you need to know from this one is that Aaron Hicks had a pretty good Orioles debut. Got the start in center field in this game, hitting 6th in the order. And what does he do? Well, he draws a walk in his first plate appearance against Shane Bieber and comes around to score on a Jorge Mateo RBI double to make it a 1-1 game in the second. And then he came up with 2 more singles later in the game, reaching all 3 times and scoring 2 runs. You will absolutely take that from Aaron Hicks, who had a hard hit ball as well. The unfortunate part is this just has to be a bit at this point, because as we know, Aaron Hicks signed to a major league deal on Tuesday to replace Cedric Mullins on the roster, who went on the 10-day IL with the groin strain and could miss up to a month, if not more, with that injury. Well, what happens in the 7th inning? Aaron Hicks comes out of the game. Taron Vavra replaces him, goes to left field. Ryan McKenna moves to center, and it comes out later that inning that Hicks left the game with muscle cramps. It came out after the game that he was cramping in both of his calves. Hopefully, it was just a little bit of dehydration / he hadn't played in about a week after the Yankees DFA'd him and released him. It had actually been more than a week since he played in the game. So hopefully it was some sort of combo there where just a little dehydration, maybe he needs the day off, but the O's have the day off Thursday and he's ready to go Friday. But hey, I don't know the last time that, Hicks had that good of a game with the Yankees where he got on base 3 times. I mean, he was getting booed in New York. He seems like a good teammate, but he just wasn't having a good time. As long as he's healthy and it's just cramps and he's back and good to go on Friday, seems like a pretty good debut for Aaron Hicks. If he's not healthy and this is an actual injury and he actually has to miss a little time or, somehow even go on the injured list, well, at that point, I feel like you just kind of have to laugh because of just the irony of going and getting Hicks and having him immediately get injured, but things happen. Hopefully he is all good. And then the 5th and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 12-8 loss to the Guardians on Wednesday is just the bottom of the lineup did great things. It started with Aaron Hicks in the 6 hole. This was an interesting lineup construction for Brandon Hyde. And I think fans before the game, rightfully so, were saying this is probably the worst looking lineup of the year. Now, the top 5 looked like it was going to look. Even without Cedric Mullins, you go Frazier, Rutschman, Santander, Mountcastle, Henderson. But with Mullins out and Austin Hayes getting the day off, Ramon Arias was not in there. It was a tough-looking lineup. All right, there's no sugarcoating it. You had Aaron Hicks hitting 6th, playing center field. Ryan O'Hearn was in right field hitting 7th. Jorge Mateo hitting 8th at shortstop. And Ryan McKenna was in left field batting 9th. So it did an outfield of McKenna, Hicks, and O'Hearn. You could have never in a million years in spring training told me that was going to be an Orioles starting outfield on May 31st when they were 15 games over 500. I would have called you crazy for that statement. But that's what happened. And honestly, that bottom of the lineup did a lot of the work. Now, Rutschman had 4 hits at the top, but those bottom 4 combined for 6 hits. Hicks had the 2 for 2 with the walk. Ryan O'Hearn had a big day, 2 for 4 with 2 doubles, 2 RBIs, and a walk. He's hitting 279 with an 845 OPS and limited playing time. Had 3 hard hit balls. Held his own, caught every ball hit to him out in right field as well. O'Hearn's looking to be a pretty nice piece off the bench right now for the Orioles, kind of a platoon bat. Jorge Mateo had an RBI bloop double in the 2nd inning. He went 1 for 4. And then Ryan McKenna even had a big hit. 2-run single in the 2nd from McKenna gave the Orioles a 3-1 lead at the time. And this all came off of Shane Bieber, former Cy Young winner, guy who Orioles fans really want, came in with a 3.04 ERA. And the Orioles, mostly from the bottom of that order, tagged Bieber for 7 runs on 8 hits over 4 innings, and that included the Santander 2-run homer in the 4th that gave them the lead. They just jumped all over Bieber. Now, Bieber hasn't been the same pitcher this year. His strikeouts are way down, but his ERA was still down, and the O's just got all over him. So nicely done by the bottom of the order. No one would have thought when they saw that lineup that this team would score 8 runs, especially against Shane Bieber, but that's what they did. Unfortunately, it was a disaster on the mound, and despite scoring 8 runs on 12 hits, the Orioles could not get out of there with a W and a series win. Instead, they lost. They dropped the series to the Guardians. And it's really because that bullpen plan just did not go well on Wednesday. So coming up next, I'll break down every pitcher who appeared in that game, how it went wrong for most of them, what the O's could have done instead, and why this was probably the biggest swing and a miss by Mike Elias and staff so far this season. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Now, buying tickets to your favorite events, like an Orioles game, it shouldn't be stressful. Well, Game Time, they take out the stress. It's the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. They've got killer deals on last-minute tickets, and with their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for all the fun you'll have. I love Game Time because I live down the street from the stadium. I'm not a season ticket plan holder. I don't really buy tickets that far in advance. Usually the day of, I decide, I want to go to the Orioles game, and I get tickets. And Game Time helps me with those last minute deals. They've got flash deals that help you get the best price on your tickets really at the last minute. They got exclusive flash deals, and the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find the tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So the Orioles lose 12-8 to the Cleveland Guardians as they drop 2 out of 3 in the series at home. And after getting shut out on Monday night, I mean, the O's offense looked great. They get 8 runs in the win on Tuesday. They get 8 runs, 7 of them off Shane Bieber on Wednesday. But unfortunately, it wasn't enough to win because the pitching plan and the pitching execution was just plain horrible for the Orioles on Wednesday afternoon. The O's gave up 12 runs on 17 hits. They used 7 pitchers. Really, only 2 of them were effective in this game. That was Baker and Coulomb at the end, who I mentioned earlier. But this was a bullpen game for the Orioles. Of course, after Grayson Rodriguez got hit around hard, gave up 8 runs to the Texas Rangers on Friday night, another rough start. Orioles sent him down, called up Keegan Akin. They weren't sure what they were going to do, and then it came out they were going to do a bullpen game. They were going to use Austin Voth as kind of the bulk pitcher, but it was generally going to be a bullpen game. Now, they had an extra relief arm with Grayson down and Akin up, so they did have 9 relievers, and they had an off day on Thursday. So those two things combined usually makes it a lot easier to do a bullpen game. That extra reliever really helps. You have a bulk guy in Voth, that always helps. And when you have the day off, you can push everybody a little further because no matter what, every single pitcher will have the day off the next day. So it didn't sound like a terrible plan, but as I talked about, there were other options, right? It could have been Bruce Zimmerman. Zimmerman on the 40-man roster who still hasn't pitched in the big leagues this year, but his last start Friday night for Norfolk, 6 scoreless innings with 8 strikeouts, looking pretty good with the off-speed stuff. Friday night start means he's on regular rest to pitch Wednesday. Orioles didn't go that way. Could have easily optioned Akin, brought up Zimmerman, had him start this game. Now, we talked about how Bruce Zimmerman was probably the only option because, Drew Rahm had gotten shelled his last start. Spencer Watkins was still building back up from the cut on his hand. DL Hall was in his deloading phase. Probably not a guy like Ryan Watson or Noah Denoyer would be called up for this start. And, all of those things combined, we looked at it and we said, it's probably only Zimmerman, right? Because we talked about how Cole Irvin hadn't been down in the minors for 15 days yet. So per the CBA, he wasn't eligible to be recalled. But that changed on Tuesday. And this is where I'm really intrigued by what the Orioles did. Because up until now, you know what? Yeah, Zimmerman's been pitching well in Triple-A. But if you remember what he looked like the last 10 or so times we saw him in the big leagues last year, home run after homer, couldn't get a lot of guys out, giving up a lot of hard contact. And he was still doing that in the minors at times this year. And I understand maybe not wanting to call him up. I get it. So you know what? I didn't love the bullpen game, but I talked about it. I said, you know what? I get it. As long as Voth can give them a little length, they have a solid bullpen. They have the day off. Cleveland offense isn't that great. They can get through this and maybe win the series. But then things changed on Tuesday because you usually have to wait 15 days to recall a pitcher after you option him. And the Orioles had optioned Cole Irvin back on May 20th, so it still had not been 15 days. But then Cedric Mullins went on the injured list on Tuesday, and a pitcher can come back at any time if they are replacing an injured player. And the Orioles, what they could have done and what they've done in the past in this almost exact situation is they could have gamed the system a little bit to get Cole Irvin up here if they felt like he was ready to start. And the fact that after demoting Irvin after those 3 terrible starts, that they called him up a couple weeks ago, now albeit to be an emergency long relief arm out of the bullpen, only pitched in 1 game, only threw 7 pitches, I get it. But the fact that they felt good enough to at least call him up a couple weeks ago tells me that it's looking better for him and they're close to maybe giving him the call again. Well, when you take a look at it, he could have replaced, technically, Cedric Mullins and come up to the big leagues. What the Orioles would have had to do, even after signing Aaron Hicks, they still could have signed Aaron Hicks and done this whole thing. Your technical roster moves would have been, you recall Cole Irvin on Tuesday, and the corresponding move is placing Mullins on the injured list. Now, I get that you don't want to take away a bullpen arm when you're only going to start Irvin on Wednesday, so you're down 1 bullpen guy Tuesday, but you're already operating with 9 relievers, and you usually operate with 8, so you just go back to 8, you're probably fine. You got Kyle Gibson, your innings eater, on the mound anyway. So you call up Irvin, you put Mullins on the injured list, and then in a separate move, you option Keegan Akin, and you activate Aaron Hicks to the roster. So you still do the things you wanted to do, but you just pair Mullins with Irvin, and that basically allows you to game the system and recall Cole Irvin while not having more than 13 pitchers, because you can't have more than 13 pitchers. That's why they would have needed to make the position player move as well. It would have been that simple. And listen, Cole Irvin has not pitched in a week. He hasn't pitched since May 24th for Triple-A Norfolk. So he's on more than regular rest to come up and make this start. That wasn't an issue either. I'm honestly shocked. Now, I'm not shocked that the original plan was the bullpen game. Doesn't surprise me. But after Mullins went on the IL, I am kind of shocked they didn't go with Irvin. And I get he had been bad. It could have been just as bad as Grayson. It could have been just as bad as it actually went on Wednesday. He was going to have a lot of hard hits, a lot of homers. But at the very least, I mean, Zimmerman and Irvin, they're guys who you feel like can at least get you through 5 innings, right? And then you can go like half bullpen game, but you can more rely on Irvin or Zimmerman to give you length, especially Irvin. He's done it a lot in his career, despite the 3 bad starts with Baltimore this year. But they didn't do that. I'm surprised they didn't do it. They went with the bullpen game. And pitcher by pitcher, it didn't go well. Now, it started with Keegan Akin, and I saw a lot of people complaining, Keegan Akin used to be a starter. How is he only going 1 inning? Well, that part, actually, I don't mind. That was really the plan from the beginning, that Akin would be the opener. And I saw a lot of people saying, don't most openers go 2 or 3 innings? No. An opener goes 1 inning, maybe pitches into the second if matchups are there. But generally, since the Rays popularized it, it's 1 inning. And the reason Akin started over somebody else was not because he used to be a starter. It's because he's a lefty, but not a super high leverage one. And the Guardians have Stephen Kwan in the 1 spot, Jose Ramirez in the 3 spot, who you want to bat righty, a switch hitter, Josh Naylor, a lefty in the 4 spot, and Josh Bell, a switch hitter in the 5th spot, who you also want to bat righty. So you want a lefty against that top of the order. That's why they went with Akin. Now, he did give up a run on the Jose Ramirez double, but he got out of the inning. And listen, as poorly as Akin has pitched at times this year, I was like, you know what? Fine. He gave up a run. Fine. He did his job. Got out of the inning with a strikeout, stranded a runner at third with 1 out, got him out of the inning. That was fine. The plan was 1 inning. It was never going to be more than 1 inning unless he went 1, 2, 3. They probably would have let him face Naylor and Bell in the second, but he faced all 5 of them in the first, struck out Bell, ended the inning. He's done. Fine with it. Then you go to Austin Voth, where the plan was about 60 pitches. That's what Brandon Hyde and Mike Elias had said earlier in the week. So you're thinking, okay, at the very least 60 pitches, you get about 3 innings, and you're hoping for about 4 innings from Austin Voth. Well, that's where the problems began, because it was not 3 or 4 innings. It was 2 1/3. He allowed the first 2 base runners to reach in the second. Then he got out of the jam, but then he loads the bases in the third, gives up a 2-run single to Andres Jimenez. And then in the fourth, it's just more and more base runners, and he just couldn't get out of his own way. So Voth leaves 2 1/3, 3 runs, 5 hits, 3 Ks, 3 walks, 58 pitches to get just 7 outs. That does not help you when you're the bulk guy in a bullpen game and you have 60 pitches to your name. You can't throw 58 and only get 7 outs. That's already putting you behind the 8 ball. The command was not good for Voth. The stuff is still there. Like, the stuff is really good. The spin on those breaking balls is really, really good, especially the curveball. But the command is just not, and that's what he's fighting right now. So then they go to Cionel Perez, who did get hit around a bit on Monday, but he was very unlucky. It was a lot of slow hit ground balls. Had the day off Tuesday, so should be ready to go. And Perez has gone multiple innings, multiple times. So you think, okay, this could be good. Well, Perez was a disaster. 2/3 of an inning, 2 runs, 3 hits, a walk, no strikeouts, 2 homers allowed on 22 pitches. And all of a sudden he leaves, and the 4-1 lead the Orioles had built, well, they're trailing 6-5 after the top of the 4th ends. Perez came in with 1 out in the 4th. He gave up 2 homers, 1 to Josh Naylor, 1 to Josh Bell. When they went back-to-back, Perez, despite his struggles this year and his 4.87 ERA, he had not allowed a home run yet this season, and he allows back-to-back homers in the bullpen game. So he throws 22 pitches. He's looking cooked. So you got to take him out. So, the team gives you the lead, the Santander homer. You go to the 5th. All right, we have Mychal Givens. He's rested. He didn't throw on Tuesday. Mychal Givens has gone length in his career. Maybe he could go 2 innings. Well, Mychal Givens completely just dive-bombed this entire thing. I mean, no outs, Mychal Givens? You can't get anyone out against the bottom of the Cleveland order? You can't do anything for me? No outs, 2 hits, 1 walk, 15 pitches for Mychal Givens. And he's gone. And I don't blame Brandon Hyde for pulling Givens after just 3 batters. Yeah, it hurts when it's the 5th inning. Givens is your 4th pitcher. Your bulk guy is already out. But when you're winning, it'd be different if the O's were down 6-1. They just would have let Givens ride it out. But they were winning 7-6. You have a well-rested Mike Baumann waiting in the bullpen who's got out of some jams before. It was the perfect move to go to him. It just stinks that Mychal Givens has been terrible. Now in 4 innings since coming off the injured list, Givens has allowed 5 earned runs, 4 hits, 6 walks to just 2 strikeouts. He does not look healthy. He's got no command. The velo is fluctuating up and down. I'm not liking what I'm seeing from Mychal Givens. So then Mike Baumann comes in and he gets a strikeout. Then he gives up a 3-run double. And it's tough. Josh Naylor, just killing the ball. He went 4 for 5 with 2 doubles, a homer, and 6 RBIs. He was otherworldly on Wednesday. But Baumann starting to maybe settle down, and then boom, 2-run homer, Gabriel Arias. All of a sudden, it's 11-7. And yeah, Baumann didn't pitch great, but I just feel for him. He probably didn't think he'd be in that spot. And at least Baumann did settle down after that. Right? He does end up going 2 1/3 innings. He got tied for the most outs with Austin Voth, who was supposed to be the long guy in this game. Baumann gets 7 outs, throws only 32 pitches, and at least saved the bullpen a little bit. He took one for the team. And then, as I mentioned, Bryan Baker had the inning and 2/3 scoreless, had that new set position. He saved the pen. And then Danny Coulombe, a nice 1-2-3 inning. But just the whole thing from start to finish, it was ugly. And I get that when you send down Grayson Rodriguez, you got to scramble maybe a little bit. And you just felt like you needed another arm and he just wasn't pitching well. I understand it. But if you're going to send Grayson down, and this is my big point, you have to have a better backup plan than this. You have to be ready to go to Zimmerman or potentially ready to go to Irvin when the IL stint for Mullins happens on Tuesday. Or call up a different arm to be a second bulk guy behind Austin Voth in this bullpen game. You got to have a better plan than going to your least reliable relievers in this bullpen game. And I see other people, Brandon Hyde this, Brandon Hyde that. Brandon Hyde didn't decide to send Grayson down. Brandon Hyde wasn't the guy who came in and said, we're doing a bullpen game. Mike Elias could have given him much better tools for Wednesday, and he did not. And Hyde went with what he could work with. And Voth couldn't get anybody out, and then Perez couldn't get anybody out, and then Givens literally didn't get anybody out. So he made the moves he had to make to try and win this game because, listen, it wasn't like this was a 12-1 game. The Orioles offense gave them a chance to win this baseball game. That's why Hyde just was pulling guys. He's like, somebody's got to get me outs. We're winning. Nobody did. You got to have a better plan than that. If you're going to send down your top pitching prospect to Triple-A and you're 15 games over 500, you better have a better plan. Grayson gave up 8 runs. The O's just gave up 12 in this game in his place. He could have done better than this. You think about how he's gone, kind of good start, bad start, good start, bad start. That means he was due for a good start. And with 8 runs of run support, I think the Orioles probably win this game if Grayson starts it. But they didn't have him start. They sent him down, and that's fine. But they had a bad plan behind it. And they found out, essentially. They found out on Wednesday and hopefully learned from those mistakes. But with Grayson in Triple-A and having to stay there for at least 15 days unless there's another injury, you're still going to need another number 5 starter at some point. I hope they don't keep going bullpen games. So coming up next, we'll finish off the pod with, well, what's next for the Orioles pitching staff, the number 5 spot, and maybe the bullpen if there could be a shakeup after a couple of shaky games. So the Orioles did lose the series to the Guardians, losing 12-8 on Wednesday. Off day here on Thursday, but they do return to the field on Friday. They are out west. Stay up late, people. 10:15 start on Friday night. Orioles and San Francisco Giants by the Bay. But hey, if you don't want to stay up for the TV, but maybe you want to snuggle into bed and listen to the game on the radio, you can catch every pitch of the Orioles' hometown broadcast on Friday night and Saturday and Sunday with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Orioles. So what's next for the Orioles pitching staff, right? Grayson Rodriguez is in Triple-A. As I record this here, about 9:45 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday, there's no 5th starter on the roster at the moment. Don't think it's going to be Austin Voth for now. And the relief corps is looking very, very shaky. So what's next? So let's start with immediately. It does help, even with how bad this went, it still very much helps that the O's have an off day here on Thursday. So in theory, if they don't make any bullpen moves, pretty much everyone except for Austin Voth and maybe not Mike Baumann, probably not Mike Baumann, are going to be available on Friday. And the Orioles, they don't have to call up a 5th starter just yet. So during the weekend, they can operate still with 9 relievers, which is going to help them. The off day will help them. Now they're going to go Kramer. It looks like Kramer Friday, Bradish Saturday, Wells Sunday in this 3-game series in San Francisco. And then what does help is they also have an off day on Monday. That's their travel day, traveling from San Francisco to Milwaukee, where they start a 3-game series on the road with the Brewers next week, Tuesday through Thursday. So after the off day Monday, most likely Kyle Gibson will go Tuesday. And how this helps is because of the 2 off days, Thursday and Monday, they don't need a 5th starter the next time around. They can pitch Dean Kramer again on Wednesday. And because he started Friday, he gets Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday off. That's regular rest. And he can start again on Wednesday. So for a bit, the Orioles won't need to make that 5th starter decision. And that could have also played into why they chose the bullpen game on Wednesday, knowing that the first time through they do a bullpen game and the second time through without Grayson Rodriguez, they won't need another starter, at least for now. The next time they will need one is Sunday, June 11th against the Royals. They'll go Kramer that Wednesday game in Milwaukee, most likely Bradish Thursday. And then Wells would go Friday against the Royals. Gibson goes Saturday against the Royals. And then the 5th starter spot would come up Sunday because Kramer would not be on regular rest, which means you would need to call someone up. Now, Cole Irvin would be eligible to be recalled. And pretty much everyone else is an option for you. Bruce Zimmerman would be an option. Spencer Watkins may be built up enough to be an option. Drew Rahm, maybe coming off some better starts, hopefully, would be an option. Even DL Hall, maybe he starts pitching a little longer. Went 3 innings on Tuesday night, but maybe if he starts pitching deeper into games, maybe he's an option. And of course, Grayson Rodriguez could be an option on the 11th as well. That's really when they need to go back to a 5th starter. Now, Rodriguez right now is scheduled to pitch Saturday. That's June 3rd, this Saturday for Triple-A Norfolk. Gives him more than a week off after his last bad start. He's probably tinkering with things. And then they could call him up as early as June 10th. They have to wait the 15 days, but those 15 days would be June 10th. That's the earliest they can call him up. So they could call him up to start the game on the 10th and push Gibson back to the 11th, or they could just wait till the 11th and call Rodriguez up. So they have a couple of options there. And hey, if they just want him to make one start in AAA and more so do side sessions in between, those kind of week-long breaks and work on things, I think that might even be better than having him start 3 games. And he could most certainly be back on the 10th or 11th and start for the Orioles against the Royals. Now, do you want him starting against a team that already has gotten him for 6 runs in 3 innings like they did in Kansas City? Maybe not, but it's not a great offense in general, and it would be probably a softer landing point for Rodriguez returning to the Pigs, but any of those other guys could help out as well. Now, turning to the bullpen, a lot of people think, there's probably going to be some moves made there as well. And there certainly could be. Now, as I said, the off day Thursday really helps. The Orioles don't have to make a lot of snap judgments because with everybody getting the day off on Thursday, they've got a better chance to kind of get everybody back to where they need to be. And as I mentioned, really from now until June 11th, the Orioles can operate with a 9-man bullpen, which is actually really, really helpful when you're thinking about a team that starters don't pitch super deep into games and a team that its bullpen is kind of getting overworked. If you can have that 9th reliever in there, that's going to be really helpful. Now, after the Voth bad outing, I don't think they're going to DFA him. The data on the breaking balls, especially the curveball, is just too good. The Orioles saw how good he could be when he started last year. They just got to get his command in focus. He was good, a couple weeks ago. He kind of lost it a little bit again. I think they're going to hold on to him. Now, Cionel Perez might be a different story. I don't think the O's will DFA him right away because with the off day, they're going to be able to use him again. I think they'll give him a couple more chances, but Perez just doesn't have the same bite on his stuff, just doesn't have the same command. He's not missing any bats. He looks kind of cooked, and I could see pretty soon the O's getting rid of Perez. Now, one move at least I think they could make is I think they're probably going to add a fresh arm on Friday. I would say most likely either Keegan Akin or Mike Baumann will get optioned. Both guys have options. Both guys pitched here on Wednesday. I would lean Akin just because he's been worse, but Baumann did pitch a lot more on Wednesday. You'll have to see, but it's probably going to be Akin. The O's, I would think either Nick Vespi, if you want another lefty, or Logan Gillespie, because he's been here this year, would be the two options just to get another relief arm up there with the Orioles. But I would think one of those guys gets optioned. But again, they're going to go with a 9-man bullpen, which is going to help for a bit, but they're going to need that starter at some point again, as I mentioned. But I think Voth is safe. I don't know for Perez. I think his days truly could be numbered in an Orioles uniform. But I mean, everyone else that has struggled a bit. I mean, Coulombe's still good. Baker showed that he's still good. I mean, Akin's going to go down. I talked about Voth and Perez. Cano and Bautista are great. The one guy that really worries me is Mychal Givens. I don't think you would DFA him at this point after just 5 outings off the IL with how good he was for you in the past and the fact that he was your veteran bullpen signing. But that's something to watch because that's going to be bad if he just can't get guys out. And I mean, he could go back on the injured list because he certainly does not look healthy at the moment. But hopefully this off day here on Thursday kind of resets things for the Orioles. And then after the off day, I'll be back with you on Friday, final episode of the week. I'll be previewing that 3-game West Coast series between the Orioles and the Giants. Giants playing right around 500 baseball this year. They've been very up and down. We'll see what the O's can do with them. And then fun episode coming up on Wednesday as well. If you remember back in early May, gave out my April awards for the Orioles. Going to give out my May awards for the Orioles. Who's been the best bat? I think we know who that is, one of the hottest hitters. Who's been the worst bat? I think we kind of know that too, but we'll talk about the pitchers that impressed, some big moments, big games from what was still, despite it ending kind of poorly, a very, very impressive month of May for the Baltimore Orioles. So those awards for the month of May coming up on tomorrow's episode. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.